Welcome to OOD Works, the podcast, a show about unique individuals and the services provided by Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, the state agency that helps individuals with disabilities find a job and be more independent. Here's your host, Kim Jump.
In this episode of OOD Works, I sit down with Floyd Poruban in Avon, Ohio. He shares about growing up, going to school, and allowing nothing to hold him back. Floyd was the first legally blind person to be admitted to and graduate from a science program at The Ohio State University, where he earned a bachelor's in horticulture and a master's in plant pathology. He went on to open a successful nursery of his own, which has been in business more than 50 years. Floyd is nearly 82 years old and still going strong. His son Rich followed in his footsteps at Ohio State and in operating the Poruban Nursery. Floyd is a 2019 recipient of OSU's College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences Distinguished Alumni Award. Floyd, thank you so much for allowing us to come into your home today and hear about your fascinating journey.
Well, you're welcome.
You were born in Lorain, Ohio?
Yes.
And it's when you were a toddler that your parents first discovered that you were having some issues with your vision?
Yeah, at about age 3, they started noticing different problems. They took me to the Cleveland Clinic for an examination. The local eye doctor said, well, I can't tell you what the problem is because, you know, I only work with glasses. So they sent me to the clinic, and after months and months and months of going back and forth from Lorain to the clinic and all kinds of tests, in 1942, they finally gave the final report to my parents saying that there's nothing we can do. He has lost over 90% of his vision. They called it optic atrophy, which has a very nebulous term. You know, there's nothing detailed about optic atrophy. Atrophy is shriveling nerve, optic nerve. That's when they said that the best thing to do for my parents to do would provide fresh air, exercise, and sunshine. So they thought about it. Oh, let's see. It was 45, I think, when my parents decided to look for a property here in Avon. This was a very, very rural community at the time. And they happened to find a home on about a 1-acre property. Happened to be vacant at the time. The property next to the house was farmed by a truck gardener, vegetable farming. So they invested, I think, $12,000 and bought the land and bought the house. And we moved there in 1945. Public health nurse and the school superintendent, the school district administrators got together and figured out what to do with this student. Can't function in a regular school. So that's when they come up with the sight-saving class. The school system arranged with a local transit company. It was called the Cleveland-Lorain Highway Coach at that point, and it used to come up into Avon in the center of town, but they decided that they would reroute one of the buses and have it come past my house, past our house, arranged to pick me up in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. Then I would exit the bus, I would cross Detroit Road, and pick up another bus coming that traveled about 15 miles to Lorain, and then I would exit the bus there on 20th Street and Broadway and walk several blocks down to where the sight-saving class was.
Oh.
Now, mind you, I'm just 7 years old at the time
Right.
doing all of this. Sometimes I'd forget things. Mom and Dad would have to go back to the school, drive back there and pick up things.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a parent, that sounds very familiar.
But no, that was the routine for 9 years. And there were all different grades. And this teacher would work individually with each one of the students, helping them learn how to read large print books, teaching them how to use the typewriter, helping them with their talking books and so forth like that. I was probably in the third grade or thereabouts when the teacher worked with me, and we didn't really type so much, but it was teaching us the keyboard positioning, your finger positioning on the keyboard.
Because it wasn't a tactile keyboard at that time.
It was blank.
It was blank.
I tried learning Braille from a lady that she herself was blind, and she worked with blind children in Elyria. They had an office right next door to the Methodist Church there in Elyria. And some of these blind students then would want to learn how to do things, and so this blind counselor, a blind teacher there, established a broom making facility in the basement of the...
Oh, wow.
So teaching the blind kids how to make brooms. And she would teach them Braille there and teach them music. The teacher was a fine pianist. So I tried learning Braille 7th or 8th grade when I tried learning Braille there. But the problem that I had working on the farm in the soil, your hands get so calloused or rough that can't, there's no detail. You can't feel the Braille dots. That's when my dad started raising bees, honeybees. And there was lots of hives. Well, prior to that, he wanted to build some kind of a place where he could store farm equipment. There was virtually nothing there on the property. A chicken house and this building that housed the steam boiler or the hot water boiler. And so we devised a way that we could combine both of those and built the skeleton of a barn around them and put a roof over the top of both of these. This kind of made a storage facility. That's when he purchased a little tractor that we kept in that building. We did have chickens and rabbits, and it was a facility that we could have a cow and a horse. So that's how I kind of grew up, handling all of these animals, learning how to deal with these animals. From very early age, learning to milk cows, running the tractor. Yeah, it was wide open space. He said, just don't get it too close to the edge, because our property dropped off about 8 or 10 feet down an embankment to a series of ponds alongside of our property years before. Those ponds were ways that farmers, in fact, the farmer that used to operate the land there that we purchased, had a pump down in that ravine that used to pump water out of the ponds to this facility that we had. That's when my dad said, when we run the tractor, you do it over by the house, so there's more room. You can run it without getting close to the edge of that ravine. When I was going to the sight-saving class there, going into the 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. Basically, that's when they started teaching students to use their hands to build little models, to wire circuits, to figure out how to make a doorbell work, to wire an electric plug.
Sure.
So that was about the 7th grade. They called it manual training then, basically sitting in a classroom doing this kind of little stuff. When I moved into the 8th grade, the manual training had a class, a 2-hour class in an actual workshop, a woodworking shop and a metal working shop. Of course, the instructors were just beside themselves. Well, what are we going to do?
What are we going to do with Floyd?
So they allowed me to join the rest of the class in the woodworking shop and, taught how to use a plane, how to use a handsaw. They didn't know quite what to do with me because I was, eager to learn, eager to run machines and so forth. And, they were just beside themselves with frustration because, God, he's going to hurt himself. I was taught how to use the wood lathe. That particular year, I put together a bunch of pieces and I fabricated this thing and made my own idea of what a rocket ship looked like. I did create a coffee table. It kind of blew their minds because all of these other students never worked on a project as big as a coffee table. With my dad working with the electric welding company in Cleveland, he arranged to get a welder and different equipment for the school workshop.
Oh.
The instructor knew that. He says, I'm afraid. But they went ahead and taught me how to use the electric welder, arc welding. We learned that. We learned how to do the wood lathe, motivation, and determination. The two things, you just keep moving. You don't want to stand still. I like to brag. I like to boast, but I had a lot of help. I don't think that I could have accomplished any of this stuff had I not had the help. And what I'm talking about, help, there's another blind lady who wrote a lot of hymns, Fanny Crosby. I have to give God credit for I couldn't have done this alone. There had to be hands.
Beautifully put.
He helped me, and he helped the instructors.
Yeah.
He helped other students assist me in, measurements and so forth. The coach realized that frustration, and he actually created jobs for me. He says, you're down here. He says, you're going to get bored. He says, how would you like to help me, with the equipment, the uniforms and so forth? Can you hang up these uniforms? And, well, there wasn't much of a place to hang them at the time. So I asked the coach, can we build a cabinet here? The industrial arts instructor, who's also a coach, said, yeah. Well, what kind of cabinet? So I sketched out what would work. And a big plywood cabinet that had a couple of doors on it that we could make in the wood shop and so forth. So we made the cabinet. Oh, great. It's a storage cabinet in the coach's office. So the coach says, here's a job for you. You can hang up these uniforms, and you can, there's all kinds of equipment and supplies come in. Well, you can help, store these supplies. The footballs need to be cleaned up, clean the mud off of them, the basketballs and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my job, cleaning all these things and storing them in the new cabinet that we built.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you take this first aid kit, and here's all the stuff that we need to put in it. You be the manager of the first aid kit. So when we go out to the football field to play ball, you bring the first aid kit out, and you have it ready for us. That's how I got involved with football.
Mm-hmm.
He says that you have earned your letter.
Nice.
Your athletic letter. And it's the first time that a handicapped person has ever earned a letter, being the student manager. Of course, when we got close to graduation, he had another idea. He handed me a little box, all wrapped up nice and pretty, tripod magnifier. And he says, I think you'll probably be able to use this when you go to college. So that was my gift from the coach. Mostly in my senior year, when the guidance counselor was working with rehab, said that I have the grades adequate for college study. Here's a bunch of reference material. Pick out a kind of a college that you would like to study in.
And so at that time, it was your guidance counselor helped connect you with, it was called rehabilitative services.
Yes.
Today known as Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, but at that time also had the Bureau of Services.
BSVI.
Yeah, BSVI, Bureau of Services for the Visually Impaired.
That's right.
And so you knew there were funds available through BSVI to help with college based on GPA?
Yes. Growing up in the farm community, learning to milk cows, to keep animals, horses, rabbits, chickens, ducks.
Mm-hmm.
My first admiration was to maybe become a veterinarian. When I went down to Ohio State, they said, no way in hell you're going to be a vet.
That was off the table, huh?
Off the table. He says, well, what's your second likeness? And I said, well, I used to work in a greenhouse. Well, my high school years, junior and senior in high school, I had a part-time job making baskets at a tomato greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe something connected to greenhouses. So they took me up to the department chairman that ran the horticulture department.
Mm-hmm.
We had a chat, and he says, we don't really work with greenhouses, but that's another division of the hort department here. He introduced me to that person. That's all flowers. But he says the hort department studies a lot of shrubs and trees, learning about trees and shrubs for landscape use. Okay, well, whatever. So that's how I got into horticulture. And then frustration again. He says, well, part of the course in the summertime, in the spring quarter, says we have to learn how to climb trees with the rope and the saddle. To learn to. It was what they call arboriculture, the maintenance of trees, learning to prune them, to work with big trees and so forth. So, frustration. I said, okay, let's try. So we learned how to climb trees with a rope and saddle.
Amazing.
In horticulture, we had to learn to at least identify close to 1,000 different kinds of plants, just by studying the plants themselves. So we spent months and months walking around campus instead of going to class. We would meet out on the oval and walk back and forth around the campus learning all different kinds of plants. So we had to learn how to identify them. And he said, well, there's going to be difficulty here because there's two plants that are different, but they are so much alike that it's going to be hard to distinguish the separation. We went down to learn those two plants. One was a European cranberry bush, and the other was an American cranberry bush. He showed me the plants, and he said, well, these are the identifying characters. There's so many teeth on the leaves, mm-hmm. so many veins and so forth that you have to look for. I said, it's easier than that. He says, what do you mean? I said, touch the flower here. The one flower was sticky, had resin all over the flower. I touched this flower, and it's very smooth. He says, that's never been in the book. So he studied the descriptions of these plants over history. He went back in the archives, and he says, it's never been in the book. That was added into the book in my sophomore year.
Wow. Now, Floyd, if we don't mention that you met your sweetheart in college, you might be in trouble later. Mm-hmm. You worked at the radio.
Started to help entertain these military people. Many of them were in wheelchairs. Many of them were amputees. There were still some that were able to walk around. Part of their give back to the school was they recognized the fact that there were problems on campus at night. Would you like to help with the escort service? Well, yes. Mm-hmm. We studied, a lot of the campus, the mapping and so forth, the roads, sidewalks and so forth. We learned them all, and we would escort them to their classes at night. Some of the military guys and I would go together because they were afraid that I would get lost and so forth. So we worked together. Mm-hmm. As the DJ and the radio station, we would take the records and record players down to the cafeteria in the dormitory on Saturday evening and spin records for a dance. Have a little dance on Saturday nights. That's how Anne, as a student nurse, she came to the university in, 61? She heard about the dances, and she and her roommate and several other nursing students would come over to the dance. Mm-hmm. That's how we got acquainted. I met her, and I would play, get the records going and go out and, have a dance with these student nurses.
Got it all figured out, didn't you?
It worked.
And you were the first individual who was blind to graduate from a science program at OSU.
Legally blind.
Legally blind. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Friends there who were legally blind also, who graduated from Ohio State, but they got their degrees in the arts, social work or music.
Sure.
But
they weren't climbing trees in this.
No, they weren't climbing. There was never another legally blind person that had ever gone through the sciences, the detailed sciences.
So then after you graduated with your master's, I understand you put out hundreds of resumes?
Yes. In my senior year, I did hundreds of resumes all over the place to try to find a job.
Yeah.
when the resumes come back, sorry, we don't hire blind people. Or, no, we can't do this. There are many ways you can handle frustration. You can cuss, you can throw things, break windows. You don't accomplish anything. I pounded my knees and said, I've got to do something. When we graduated, that's when I married Ann. We married the very next week after graduation.
You didn't waste any time.
And then a couple of weeks later, and applied for a vendor's license and established a business here called the Poruban Nursery. And that was in 1964. There were a number of classmates from horticulture who started their little businesses who were looking for plants. And I was able to propagate plants, make little plants from big plants, and be able to sell them little plants to start their businesses with. The connection with that, I had a classmate down at Ohio State in horticulture also, whose father had a business here in Avon called the Lakewood Nursery. They actually lived in Lakewood, but his business was here in Avon. It was about a 210-acre parcel that they had a big nursery here. They raised shrubs. He had me propagate some stuff for him. So I propagated material for him. There was another fellow that lived in Vermilion that we propagated for. There was a couple of them around here that asked if I could propagate for them. So that's basically how I got started in business, propagating. The connection with my dad, he said, does your son do any landscaping? Well, Dad said, no, but he has, he has contact with a big nursery where he can get plants. So that's another aspect of our business here. These classmates and different people that wanted to work, they said, well, I can drive the truck for you if we can I work for you? So that's how we started. We landscaped a whole allotment, several different houses down there in Amherst. Some of it was seeding of grass lawns, or instead of that, we did a lot of sod work, laying of sod. So that's expanded from doing that in Amherst. We did some sod work here in Avon and some in Lorraine, some in Elyria. Ann and I decided that, maybe I should try to get a piece of ground and start our own nursery. So that's when we applied. We started about 1968 applying for a federal loan. The federal loan system was called the Farmers Home Administration, FMHA, and we started communicating with a couple of attorneys, representatives from FMHA, and again, frustration. We've never loaned money to a blind person before.
Wow.
Don't think we can do that. Can you give us some idea that you will be able to expand your business and, propagate for other people? And, argue back and forth. They decided, well, they can't bring themselves to loan money to a blind person. It's federal dollars to a blind person. So I, in my frustration again, I spoke out. And he came back the very next day and says, you got the loan.
Wow.
And we were loaning money to purchase this property here. 1969. Got a hold of our realtor and we arranged with the landowner here to get the papers signed and so forth. Part of my loan was to a very small greenhouse that we built here. We purchased a tractor. We didn't have a building or anything here, so we brought over what we could, and she allowed us to have access to the property while the process of the loan went through and all the papers were signed and so forth. A way frustration kind of works its way through in progress. About 5 years later, I applied for an attachment to our farm loan to get some money to build a house. Again, the frustration. The maximum amount that we can loan you with your other loan is $20,000. So I said, how can I build a house for 20? So we took the loan anyway, second mortgage. So we took the loan about late August of 1975. We started planning out where we're going to build a house. There was a number of friends of mine who had experience with tripods and, surveying equipment, came and helped me lay out surveying the property to lay out a floor plan for the house. One of the neighbors here was a gentleman that had a backhoe. He agreed to help dig the pit for the foundation. It's a lot of collaboration, a lot of work together.
You were making that loan go far, though.
Well, I had to because I couldn't find anybody to build the house for $20,000.
Right.
Not being able to find people, not being able to have a lot of free money to hire in people. Damn it, you got to do it.
You were kind of used to that, though. You're kind of used to just got to do it.
Frustration is the motivation. You have to have faith because it's the only way you stay on your feet.
A transcript of today's episode is available at ood.ohio.gov/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. We're on social media at Ohio OOD. Do you have a disability? Do you want a job? We can help. oodworks.com.